Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and you may remember several months ago I did the top 10 best Blu-ray 3Ds I own. These were movies that I considered to be some of the best 3D experiences you could have, whether in theaters or at home, but mostly at home because, they were discs. Unfortunately, with all the good, there's also a lot of bad. And there are 3D movies that are just garbage, they're blurry, they don't, for lack of a better term, pop. But these are the movies that gives 3D a bad name, in my opinion. Just like the best list, there are much more great 3D experiences, and like the worst list, there are just as many bad ones that we did not get to cover. But these are, in my opinion, the top 10 worst 3D experiences for movies that I personally own. And I've hesitated to do this partly because in some cases I'm embarrassed to own the movies. But let's get started. At number 10, we have Shrek. Now, I love Shrek. I know a lot of people hate it. I know people say it hasn't aged well, but this Academy Award winning film, Best Animated Feature, and it was also nominated for the screenplay, by the way, was not made with 3D in mind. Now, I got the box set that had all of them in 3D, and I think 2, 3, and especially 4 are worthy 3D movies, but this is almost flat. It's almost flat. There's no pop to it. There's no immersion. And I actually think it's so bad you might as well be watching it in 2D. At least that's my opinion. So Shrek, that's one that's not really worth getting if you own a 3D TV. At number 9, another bad 3D experience is Men in Black 3. Outside of a couple shots where things are being thrown at the face, it's really not immersive. It's not opening up the world, so to speak. It's just once in a while something is shot at you. Either it's a dart or one of those wooden things or a gun. And yeah. So Men in Black 3 is definitely not a very good 3D experience. Although I will say, out of all the movies on this list, this one was one of the bigger surprises. I was actually surprised at how much I enjoyed the movie. And granted, those couple shots where they are deliberately sticking things out at you, I guess make it worth watching 3D, but it's overall just a very lukewarm experience. At number 8 on the list, we have The Pirates, Band of Misfits. Now, you would think this one would be a great 3D movie because it's using stop motion, they can do it with a 3D camera, and there's an actual set. And admittingly, the 3D, there's some depth there. But again, they're not utilizing it very well. It's one of those things where it's like, well, if I have to watch in 2D, am I missing anything? And the answer is no, you're not missing anything. It's just very static for the most part. It's there because, again, there's a set and they're doing stop motion 3D, but ultimately, if you have to see it in 2D, whoop-de-doo. At number 7 on our list, and this is pretty much one of the last times I'm going to say this because after this is when things get really bad, we have the Peanuts movie. Again, main issue, 3D's fine, it's there, that's a problem. It's there, it's not contributing to anything, it's not contributing to the movie itself. And then when they do those little sequences where it's like it's hand-drawn, the thought bubbles, it just looks really weird looking. I don't think 2D hand-drawn stuff was really made to be effective with 3D. With that said, now we start getting to the really bad stuff, and that's with The Lion King. Now, I kind of went back and forth which one is worse. Is The Lion King, The Beauty and the Beast, or The Little Mermaid the worst of Disney's 3D up conversions for their 2D films? Because here's the thing, with 2D, I love 2D, and this is one of the areas where I don't think 3D is going to benefit much because they're drawing, they're flat. The whole idea behind a hand-drawn film is that it kind of comes alive, but it's flat. Well, you make it in 3D and it just doesn't work as well. But ultimately, I settled on Lion King because Beauty and the Beast, the ballroom scene, and the mob scene to a lesser extent did kind of stand out a little bit better in 3D. With Little Mermaid, a lot of the underwater sequences, of which there's many, looked fine. The Lion King, outside of a stampede scene, just looks like a pop-up book. It's like the characters are literally just popping out, but there's no depth to their popping out. There just is none. It's literally a pop-up book on the screen. And while I wouldn't really recommend getting any of the 2D animated movies in 3D, this one is by far the worst. Of course, it's out of print and it's really hard to find. And because it's hard to find, that makes this really expensive, especially since this has a collector's case. But yeah, as you can see, there's the 3D disc, but it's barely used for me. I definitely recommend sticking to 2D on this one. This is like one of the few movies that I really like the movie, of course. But out of all the movies on the list, this is the only one where it's like, this is for certain 2D only. This was never meant to be 3D, could never work in 3D, and they should never have attempted it, in my opinion. However, what's interesting is that the number 5 movie on our list looks like it would benefit from 3D, and it just didn't, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Now, this is an especially interesting one for me because there's a little bit of a story behind this one. Originally, both movies were going to be released post-conversion 3D. Apparently, the 3D was so bad for the Deathly Hallows Part 1, Warner Brothers canceled the 3D release because after the whole Clash of the Titans fiasco, they would rather release a no 3D movie than a poor 3D movie, which I thought was a good call. Now, I wish people had been exercising that a little bit more afterwards. It didn't really happen. But when Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out and it was in 3D, it was, I remember being pretty good in theaters. But I got it on Blu-ray 3D and it was awful. It was blurry, it was muddy. I don't know if it was like a mastering problem, but what should have been a good 3D transfer, and it seemed to be a good 3D transfer in theaters, just didn't work anymore. And what's really especially peculiar about this is Part 1 did eventually get a 3D release on Blu-ray, and it was significantly better. Not in a, oh wow, they're doing it really right, and this is what Part 2 should have been. No, it was still kind of a fairly non-eventful 3D transfer, but it did pop a little bit more. It wasn't blurry. It at least was smooth. This one's so dark. This is so dark. And it's not just because of the glasses. I have actually put the 2D disc in, and the 2D image is brighter. The 3D image, for some reason, is darker. And then on top of that, you're putting the glasses on, and this was just a disaster all around. And here's the thing. Keep in mind, we're at number 5 on the list. Number 5. You can just imagine how bad they're about to get. Although, now that I look at number 4 might not be as bad as this. But yeah, this is definitely where things get really bad. Now, number 4 on the list, I'm just going to come up and say, it's Michael Jackson's This Is It. Now, I already did a full separate video about this, and I'll link to it at the end. But I'm going to put this on because this was just so strange. This was a TV exclusive. You couldn't buy it in the stores. In fact, as you can see, for promotional use only. So unless you go and get this on eBay, you could just never buy it. And the 3D sequences that are in here are very, very good. But most of the movie is not in 3D. It's in 2D. It's mainly on this because it's really odd. And again, I made a full video reviewing this disc, which I will link to at the end. I guess the only reason I'm going to put it on the list is because even though this technically isn't an excruciating experience, considering what it costs online to get it, because again, it wasn't sold in stores, it was a promotional item, I'm kind of trying to make it a point, guys, it's really not worth hunting down. But we're about to get to the ugly, and I mean the truly ugly, once again. Number 3, Suicide Squad. Now, I want to state right up front, this was a prank gift. Someone got this for me for Christmas last year. It was a gag gift. I guess it was like $9 or something. This was when Best Buy was starting to clear out a lot of their Blu-ray 3Ds and charge like $8 for them. And they got me this as like, you know, just a joke. And now it completes the DCEU, so, or whatever the heck they're calling it now. I think they're calling it Worlds of DC. Anyway, this is not only one of the worst movies you're going to see, but the 3D is just a massive, massive mess. The editing for this movie does not lend itself to a good 3D experiences. Not only that, the colors are really weird. The visuals are just a muddied, textured mess. The fast editing makes it so that nothing about this 3D version remotely works, and in fact, it's very, very painful to watch most of the time. This is like one of the few 3D movies that I actually did get a headache from. I was getting a headache watching it. I mean, I'm sure it also helped that did not help that the movie was awful. But yeah, Suicide Squad 3D, skip the movie altogether. I'm not even going to recommend it in 2D. Just forget this thing existed. I think I selected it as the worst film of the year on my top 10 worst films of the year list that year, and I see no reason to change that stance now. Now, our number 2 choice is another interesting one because I don't know whether 3D was intended for it or not. I heard in advance that 3D was not going to be a main focus for the movie. And yet, it was hastily converted to 3D. And when you watch the movie, it seems like, no, they were filming it with 3D in mind. But the conversion was so quick and poor, it just stood out as a very miserable experience. And this is also interesting because this is one of the few movies where like 90% of the people who saw it, they saw it in 3D. It had just come out after Avatar. People really were into the 3D again. And the next 3D experience they got was like a major goose egg, which I think contributed very, very heavily to the questions of, is 3D even worth it? And I still think we're suffering from it as a result. And it's this. Alice in Wonderland, Tim Burton. Now, I've got mixed feelings about the movie. I gave it a 3-star review, which was technically a recommendation. Not sure if I super liked it. I think I just liked that it was, compared to other Alice in Wonderland movies, probably the best one we got, but still not a great movie. And it's amazing how many movies are like swords are sticking out, or the spears are, or like the hat is being thrown at you, and the shots are long. There's not this quick-paced editing because it feels like it was being filmed with 3D in mind. It looks like it was being filmed with 3D in mind, but again, it's weird. The 3D post-conversion was very hastily done. And as a result, it looks really, really weak as a result. And again, it's another dark movie. Now, this doesn't have the same issue that Harry Potter had, where the image was literally darker. But I mean, it was a dark enough movie that when you put the glasses on, it looks like it was filmed with bed sheets over the camera or something. So Tim Burton, for the record, has actually made much, much better 3D movies. I liked the 3D version of Frankenweenie. I definitely liked the 3D version of whatever the heck her name is, of Extraordinary Children, where like all the kids with the unique powers were living in that house. I actually have that in 3D, and I've watched it a couple times in 3D. That was a good one. So Tim Burton does strike me as someone who can use 3D well. And again, it looked like he wanted to. But I think what happened ultimately was that he was shooting it just in case it got a 3D release. And by the time Disney decided to actually commit to the 3D version, I think it was too late to really make it substantially good. And so as a result, we have a very, very weak 3D movie, which really should be a very good 3D movie. And it's a shame that the 3D helped make this $1 billion movie. Think about it. The 3D was so big after Avatar that they made this into a $1 billion movie. And you know, it's really sad that we went from Avatar to this, and then, you know, people just got really tired of it. However, with that said, there was one more movie that came out shortly after this that really did it in for 3D. This was the movie that was so poorly done in 3D, so poorly expressed in 3D, and in fact had so little 3D effect that it just, I think this is what killed 3D for a lot of people. It should be noted that this movie was poorly made overall. In fact, it was so poorly made, I even hesitated including it on the list. Because to include it on the list shows that I actually own it. And it's really hard to admit that I do. Screw it. Screw it. Let's do this. The number one worst 3D movie I have is... Please, 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 don't go. Let me explain. So, to let everyone know why this abomination is in my house, you have to take this into consideration. Whenever there's a new format out, it's like having a new toy. You get it and you buy a bunch of movies that you normally would never buy because it's new and you just want something to play on it. For those of you who buy game consoles, there are probably a few launch title games that you do not enjoy, probably never enjoyed, probably never would have bought, but because the system was new and this is what was available, that's why you have it. I also want to add that my first DVD that we ever got was Wild Wild West, and the second was Lost in Space, because that's how bad the selection was when DVD first came out. Those were the movies that actually seemed like they were worth getting because DVD was just brand new. So with that in mind, when Blu-ray 3D first came out, this was one of the first movies that was out there. It was a Best Buy exclusive. It had a nice little cover, which I no longer have for some reason. I don't know what happened to it. I wish I did. It's like dressing up a turd or something. But so yeah, I got this because, hey, the 3D format was new and I was just buying what was available. Now it definitely come to temper that a little bit. I wasn't going to buy Drive in 3D, and I wasn't going to buy Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs in 3D. There were just some movies that weren't worth owning one way or the other. But I do have The Last Airbender, and The Last Airbender is truly a disgrace that it's in 3D. In fact, even look at this cover. Just look at it. See how big the 3D letters are. They really made a big deal of the fact that this was 3D. And I remember seeing it in theaters. And it happened to be during a week when I was working so much overtime, I only had time to see one movie that week, which is unusual. And I remember getting in theaters, I put the glasses on, the logo was in 3D, and then it was flat. And it was flat, and it was flat, and it was flat. And I was like, where the heck is the 3D? And then at one point, I think 20 or so minutes into the movie, some water splashed out, and a rock came out, and it was like, this is stupid. This is so stupid. And not just the movie, although the movie itself is like an abomination as well. I think this was also my choice as the worst film of the year when it came out. It was really bad. But the 3D was so bad. And it darkened the screen so much because, again, I typically don't complain about the darkening of the screen. I do know that you do get a little bit of dimness for the theater. But if the 3D experience really adds something, if the projectionist does their job and turns the brightness up, that's not much of an issue. They didn't do that here. The brightness was not turned up. The movie was already naturally dark, which was strange because it was in the daylight most of the time. And the 3D was so... It looked like they put it through like an automatic up converter program and didn't tweak it at all. They just left it as is on the first run through. And wow, was it bad. This was garbage. And then you had the movie to contend with. The movie was super bad. And you know what was really sad? I actually expected this to be great. For a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously it was based off very good source material. At that point, Shyamalan was not complete mud. It's like, well, this is a good director. And a good director dealing with good source material can really make a fine movie. And the third thing was, I actually, for some reason, bought the soundtrack before I saw the movie, because it was James Newton Howard and I really love him. And the soundtrack is amazing. Like, it's a really, truly good soundtrack. People seem to forget about that because it's in such a bad film. So I thought that the odds were stacked in favor of the movie, and oh boy, it just was not. And then the 3D just made it worse. So yeah, I'm ashamed to say that I own this. And I'm even kind of like wondering whether or not I should restrain myself when it comes to new formats, because I almost did it again. When the 4K Ultra HD Blu-rays came out and I was starting to buy them, I even remember I almost bought Fantastic Four, the remake, or the 2014 version, whatever the heck it was, on Ultra HD because, you know, it was what was available. But I ultimately reminded myself, no, remember The Last Airbender, remember Wild Wild West. Don't do that. Just buy movies that you want to buy. So hopefully this will never happen again. So, to recap real quick, the worst Blu-ray 3D experiences, in my opinion, are Shrek, Men in Black 3, The Pirates Band of Misfits, The Peanuts movie, The Lion King, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, Michael Jackson's This Is It, Suicide Squad, Alice in Wonderland 3D, and The Last Airbender. Although, let's be fair for a second. Let's be fair and acknowledge that these movies are still worth watching in some capacity or another. It's these movies you're going to have a much harder time with. Anyway, those are my choices for the absolute worst 3D experiences I've had. What about you? Do you have any 3D experiences that you just think are absolutely terrible, that should have been on this list? Please, I would love to know. So, comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, consider becoming a Patreon member. It's totally optional, but even as little as $1 a day goes a long way to helping the channel run smoothly. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.